So, Deltarune Chapter 5 is finally releasing. It doesn't seem like all that long ago that we were discovering the secrets that Chapters 3 and 4 had for us, from what Tenna and Mike actually looked like to what the next part of the Weird Route looked like, and with Chapter 5 on its way extremely soon, there are plenty of questions that we are bound to be asking along the same lines, so I figured it would be a good time to dust off the channel, make a Deltarune video, and get everyone prepped for Chapter 5 and what we should expect. So, before we begin, welcome to Epoch, your place for everything indie game related, and let's figure out everything we actually know about Deltarune Chapter 5. Now, that intro is a little misleading because without a pretty substantially long video, I can't go over literally everything, but in this video I will be covering the most major parts that we actually know about Deltarune Chapter 5, which means that if you already have done a deep dive into everything, then you might already be familiar with these, but even still, this should be a good refresher for what you should be looking for when going into Chapter 5. First off, I want to talk about something that was shared all the way back in Chapter 3, which of course is the Eggman. Deltarune's Eggman has showed up behind trees in various places throughout every chapter of Deltarune thus far, and in Chapter 3 we got a hint as to where we can expect to find the Eggman in the remaining chapters of the game, telling us where Chapter 4's egg would be and hinting that Chapter 5's egg will be in a place where he harvests the wheat, which will take place on Sunday, which aligns with Chapter 5 since that's the day of the festival. This gives us not only a good hint about where to find him when we actually get to play through the chapter, but also allows us to infer that the Chapter 5 Dark World will in fact have fields of wheat or something close to it. In the secret boss battle against Gerson Boom, we're told about the chapters in Gerson Boom's book, a book which is completely based off the prophecy that we get to see in Chapter 4, and he tells us about Chapters 1 through 4, which align nicely with what we have seen in the chapters of Deltarune thus far, but then he tells us about Chapter 5 being the Field of Pink and Gold, in which, quote-unquote, the vast garden is charred into an inferno of jealousy, which when paired with the statement from the Eggman, aligns quite nicely, showing that the Dark World will likely be covered in wheat fields and plants, then possibly will be burned by the jealousy of a specific someone who has a prophecy piece about him, that being Asgore Dreamer. Asgore Dreamer, Chris's adopted father, is known in Undertale to wield fire magic just like Toriel, and considering the fact that Susie is shown to be able to use magic in the Dark Worlds along with other monsters like Noelle and Birdly, it is reasonable to assume that Asgore, if inside the Dark World, would have that power, which seems to be the case since a portrait of him is shown directly inside the prophecy, being labeled in the game files as Boss 3 with Tenna and Queen before being labeled as Boss 1 and Boss 2. There's something about this order that seems to imply something else, possibly being the bosses that we can recruit to our team, as there are two other bosses, that being the Titan/Roaring Knight in Chapter 4 and King in Chapter 1. But they don't appear here, but as this isn't a theory video, I will leave that discussion to you all in the comments. Speaking of comments, I commented on something earlier that's extremely important to Chapter 5 and is something we've been given clues about from as early as Chapter 2, that being the festival. The festival is an extremely important event as it's presumably the main event that Asriel, Chris's brother, would be arriving for, along with it being important for Noelle on the Weird Route as she is stated to be going with Chris to the festival. Not only is the festival important because of these reasons, but judging off the fact that Gerson mentions Chapter 5 being the final chapter in his book, it's possible that the Roaring Knight would appear in the Light World, possibly as just a hooded figure or some unrecognizable person, before opening the Dark Fountain in the middle of town and starting the roaring. Now, originally I was going to have a whole lot more of a video to show you all, but then editing ended up taking a long time, and before I knew it, Deltarune Tomorrow was my reality with only half my video done, so I'm going to be winging, dinging, and gastering the rest of this thing so that I can actually have a video before Chapter 5 releases. So pardon the editing being terrible for the rest of this video, I genuinely just don't have enough time to get this video properly edited before Deltarune releases, so while a Deltarune Chapter 4 playthrough plays in the background, let's talk about the Weird Route. On the Deltarune.com/chapter4/thank-you website, we have several weird instances of certain questions and answers giving hints about the Weird Route, with the most notable instance being when we learned that the answer to when Noelle would smile in the Weird Route would be sometime sometime during the festival, or in other words, sometime in Chapter 5. This is very interesting because Smiles and Deltarune have been heavily associated with the entity known as Device_Friend, a strange and cryptic character that's shown up in the hidden areas, such as in Chapter 2 when it appears before the Spamton Neo fight, or in Chapter 3 in the hidden board minigame behind the S-rank door. This could be correlated, however, another notable instance of this happened just recently when the Chapter 5 trailer released, allowing certain people to answer the question of where she might smile, but the participants as of yet haven't received an answer like last time, with the answer possibly only being given 24 hours before Chapter 5 actually releases. Unfortunately, I don't have very much information regarding this particular ARG aspect since I'm not one of the eligible participants. However, a video from GoldPro that was recently released covers various aspects about this particular mystery, and judging by how close Deltarune Chapter 5 is, we should be getting an answer to this question soon enough. And for anyone curious about that, the link for that video will be in the description for you to watch after this video is over. But moving on, we have one more major thing to cover, that being the Deltarune Chapter 5 trailer. This trailer is jam-packed with quite a lot of information about Chapter 5, with a screenshot in the newsletter potentially showcasing what the chapter may look like inside the Dark World, along with showing a few battles in certain particular areas, with some more notable than others. For starters, the floating white feather in this scene seems to be presenting itself as a white pen of hope, since it is white and traditionally feathers were used as early pens, being dipped in ink and used as writing material, which is very interesting since it seems almost too obvious as an answer to what Gerson said in his boss battle, possibly acting like a lure that an anglerfish would use to gather its prey. However, it's entirely possible that this is just a useful item that the party will have on their adventure, along with being a key item for later on. There's also a battle scene where Chris is the exclusive party member and the soul is dodging knives coming from the left side, which is interesting as there is no enemy in sight, along with Chris's signature weapon being the knife, so it's possible that this is hinting towards a Soul versus Chris fight sometime in Chapter 5. Lastly, there are a few plant-themed enemies, hinting towards Asgore's flower shop being the Chapter 5 Dark World location, or at the very least that there will be plenty of flowers in the Dark World, likely from Asgore's shop, and that is the entirety of what we actually know about Chapter 5, or at least the major points that have been given. Seeing how close the chapter is, this video is really more about building hype around that event than fully trying to predict or explain everything about Chapter 5. However, if there was something useful that this video shared, then feel free to share about that in the comments below, and of course, if you enjoyed, then feel free to like the video or subscribe to the channel, as it would help me out enormously when making my future videos. And until those future videos come, as always, this has been Epoch, your place for everything indie game related, and I hope I'll see you all in the next one.